Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Yusuf here from Dental Reviews and I hope you're all well. Now in today's video I'm going to talk about photography in dentistry. It's a video I've been meaning to make for some time. It's been long overdue, but more specifically the gear that I have and the gear that I would recommend if anyone's considering buying new photography gear in 2025. You'll have to forgive me because I may go off on tangents from time to time talking about photography in general or some specific terms, but I will try and explain it along the way. Okay, so I'm going to jump straight into gear that I have. I got this back in 2018, so it's slightly dated. However, that being said, it still performs very well to this day in terms of what I want from it. It still takes very good photos that I'm happy with and I can show my patients. So here it is. It's the Canon 77D, which is a DSLR camera. DSLR stands for digital single lens reflex, and it's a crop sensor. For those of you that don't know, a sensor can come in different sizes, so you can get your typical full frame sensor or full sensor, or you could also get crop sensors like an APS-C or micro four thirds MFT sensors. Typically, full frame sensors are the most expensive. You have to take this into consideration when you're buying a setup, your camera and your lens, because it will affect your overall focal length. Here's what I mean by it, for example. So I've got my Canon 77D, which is a crop sensor as I mentioned, and I've paired it with the 100mm macro lens also from Canon. Because it's a crop sensor, it almost magnifies the image by 1.6. So rather than getting a 100mm image, which you would normally get with a full frame sensor, I'm getting around 160. If you're a little bit confused, don't worry, I'm going to try and break this down. So here are some images that I'm going to put up on the screen. I've taken a photograph of this Nike iconic football, which you can see with my Canon 77D and the macro lens. Now you can see the overall picture and you can see the quality of the image. Now I'm going to show you another photo with my Sony camera, which is a full frame camera. It's got a full frame sensor and I've got it at 100 mils with a specific lens. And you can actually see that it feels like it's slightly more zoomed out and you're seeing more of the image. I'm also going to show you what the image looks like with the same Sony camera and the same lens at 100 mil, but I'm going to put it onto APS-C mode, so the crop mode. And you can see that the image goes back to being similar to what you saw on the Canon camera. Either way, you can look at how well both of these lenses capture the information and how much detail they show when doing macro photography. Okay, so I'm going to try and explain focal lengths for those of you that may not be familiar with the term. So when you're browsing lenses, for example, you'll see that they may have different focal lengths. So you might see 16 millimeters, 25, 35, 50. We might even see a range, 16 to 28 or 28 to 70 or 100 to 400, for example. The ones with a range are zoom lenses, or it will have a fixed focal length. It might just say it's a 35 millimeter lens, and they're typically a prime lens. And typically in dentistry, we use prime lenses. For example, they may range from 60 to 105, let's say. Now, with regards to the numbers that you see, like as I said, when browsing the lenses, the smaller the number, the less zoomed in it is. So for example, you're a landscape photographer and you want to take a photo of the whole landscape, capture the whole building, for example, or you want to, or for whatever reason, you just want to capture a lot of the environment, you would want a wide angle lens. So you would want something, let's say at 16 millimeters. However, if you're a sports photographer or you're somebody who likes to photograph wildlife, for example, you're on a safari and you really want to capture an image of a leopard in the tree, you need something that's a lot more zoomed in. So you're looking at more of a telephoto lens, which is around 100 plus. So you might get a zoom lens 100 to 400 or even 200 to 600 or even now I've seen Sigma with an even bigger focal length. So essentially, the bigger the number, the more zoomed in the image will be. And I'll also touch on the fact that ideally you want a macro lens. And the reason for that is because it has a magnification ratio which is desirable for us in dentistry. So when you get those close-up photos, ideally you want a one-to-one magnification, which means that what you photograph is represented equally onto the sensor. Another good thing about macro lenses is that you can get really close to the image when photographing them, and the minimum focus distance is really small. And while I'm talking about photography, I'm also going to discuss aperture, which is something important to understand when it comes to dentistry. When browsing lenses online or in the shops, for example, you'll see an F number next to the lens, and that indicates the aperture. So for example, you might see 100mm macro lens f2.8, and that means that the minimum aperture is f2.8 that it can go to. That's what it can stop down to, f2.8, which means that it's quite a fast lens and generally high quality. Anything around f2.8 is known to be more expensive and generally better quality glass. It is inversely proportional. So aperture is essentially the widening or the narrowing of the lens. So if it's got f2.8 or even less, for example, it means that the lens is very wide open and it's letting in a lot of light. And conversely, if the f number is higher, f22, f25 or f32, it means that the aperture is really, really small. But a really important thing to understand with aperture is that it affects your depth of field. So for example, if you're taking a portrait photo, typically you'll see that the background is very blurry, and that's because the photographer has decided that they just want the subject in focus and they want to blur everything else. And that's what gives you that creamy bokeh. Or let's say on your mobile phone, you can put it into portrait mode and you want the background to be blurred, and it artificially gives it that look. It gives it that shallow depth of field and that more quality portrait type photo. And with the high apertures, as I said, f22 to f32, it means that more of the image is in focus. But you can probably see where the issues arise when using high apertures like we do in dentistry, because we need pretty much the whole image to be in focus. We just don't want the incisors to be in focus. We want to make sure that when we up close to the patient, we want the incisors and generally the molars to be in focus, which means that we need the depth of field to be as wide as possible or as big as possible to make sure that there's no blurriness. But the problem is when you've got the f number at f22 or f32, it means that the aperture is really, really small, which means that it's not letting in a lot of light, which is then why we need to use external sources of light. Or most commonly in dentistry, we use flash lighting like twin or ring flashes, or we may even use continuous lighting. And that leads me on to the next part of my setup, is the flash that I have. So I've got a ring flash, and it's from a company called Nissin. I got it on offer at the same time that I got my camera, luckily. And overall, it's been a really, really good ring flash. It's performed really well. I have it in manual mode. You can use it in ETTL mode, but I find that I get more consistency using it in manual. The diffusion of the light is quite nice with the light diffuser that it has there. So the lighting isn't too harsh, which is something that you can get with other ring flashes. Now, you're going to hear people say that twin flashes are more professional or the more advanced setup, which I don't completely disagree with. But at the same time, it's important to understand that you can still get very, very good photos with a ring flash. Don't feel like you have to get a twin flash to get the best possible photos. There are different factors which may contribute to which type of flash that you can get. Don't get me wrong, you will get really aesthetic photos with a twin flash and soft boxes and everything else. It will soften the image and make them look aesthetically pleasing, but you can still get really good results with the ring flash. It's important to understand that people have different types of setups, different types of lifestyles. So if you're going to leave your camera in practice, then that's absolutely fine. You can have it set up on an L bracket with your twin flashes already set up, because you're not really going to move it around that much, and you're not going to have to set it up every day. Whereas if you're somebody that takes your camera gear with you, you're in different practices, or you might train to work, or you might cycle to work, or whatever it may be, you want that sort of versatility, and you want something that you can just quickly take out and you can run a gun and you can shoot with it without any sort of setup time. And to be fair, that's why I do like my ring flash, and I probably will continue to use a ring flash. That being said, it's not that I do loads of massive aesthetic cases anyway. And I pack all of my gear into a camera bag, which I do recommend. Mine is from Lowepro. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I do highly recommend it because it stores everything safely. It's got nice compartments. You can put other things in there, for example, your battery pack or other accessories when you travel, for example. Sometimes I might take my drone or whatever it may be. So it's really useful and handy to have. So that's my setup, my relatively basic setup. I mean, the lens is very, very good, but otherwise it's quite basic if you compare it to others, but it absolutely does the job. But now I'm going to talk about cost and equipment that I would recommend if you're somebody looking to buy some. Now, if you're on a budget, there are reliable places where you can buy used items from, for example, Wex Photography or NBP or even eBay. I actually got some of my equipment from eBay. But if you wanted the cheapest possible setup, you're looking at getting a second-hand DSLR. For example, mine is the Canon 77D, and I think you can get it for around 350 on some of these websites. You probably will be able to get it less on eBay or other types of websites. And you can pair that with a 60mm Canon lens, which will work really well on a crop sensor like this. The good thing about it is that with the 60mm lens and a crop sensor, you don't have to get too close to patient. Whereas if you had a full frame DSLR or mirrorless and you had a 60mm lens, you'd have to get really close to make sure that you fill the sensor. You could also go for the 100mm like I have, but it is more expensive and it is heavier. And it still retails for around 450 used. Again, you could probably get it a bit cheaper, but it's still not cheap. But do I recommend it? The answer to that is no. I wouldn't recommend this type of setup in 2025. If you're looking to buy some gear, I would try and steer you towards getting a mirrorless setup. And the reason for that is because I find that it's more usable in this day and age. And yes, I do appreciate it's more expensive, but I also think that there are so many other uses you can get from your camera. For example, if you want to use it for family portraits or if you're traveling, etc., etc., you can get some great shots. And their mirrorless cameras I find to be a lot more usable in terms of their connectivity with the modern day smartphones as opposed to the older DSLR cameras. And also because I like photography and I will try and get you guys into photography and getting used to it. I find that if you're better in general photography, you will tend to be a good dental photographer as well. Okay, so what then would I actually recommend? Now, I'm a little bit biased because I do have a Sony setup, but I will try my best to give an all-rounded opinion. And I have done some research with Canon and Nikon as well. But I will start with Sony. So with Sony, I'm going to start with their APS-C mirrorless options, and the ones that you can look at are the Sony Alpha 6400, so the A6400, or the 6700, and they're both APS-C lenses, and they're the cheaper options that they have. Very, very good cameras. My brother-in-law recently got the A6700, and I was really impressed with its functionality and how it performed when we were on holiday recently. So it's a really, really good camera. You compare it with the Sony 90mm macro lens. It's a G OSS lens, and it's a fantastic lens. But having said that, Sony have just released their G Master 2.8 100mm lens, which looks incredible. Such a good lens it looks like, and I really want to get my hands on it. However, it retails for around £1,400, so it's definitely not in the budget option. But if you're beginning, I don't think you necessarily need that lens. If you're just starting out with photography, you just want to simply use it for dentistry, stick with a 90mm lens, and that's okay. And then with the flash, I would probably just decide on what type of flash you want to get, if you want a ring or a twin flash, but Godox have some really good options, and it looks like it diffuses the light quite well, so I'll probably recommend one of the lights from Godox. Godox also have some options if you want to buy everything in a kit. For example, if you wanted a twin bracket with it and the diffusers, you're able to buy them on their website or some of the third-party websites. Now, if for whatever reason you wanted other options, then Nikon, for example, they have the Z52, which is their more basic mirrorless camera. It is a crop sensor, and it's approximately 20 megapixels, so plenty really for a beginner. And you compare this with a Nikkor ZMC 105mm f2.8 lens, or even third-party lenses like from Tamron. They have a 90mm lens that you can use. Having a look on Nikon's website, the Z6 II also looks like a good mirrorless camera. It's a step up from the Z52. And as for Canon, the most basic option is the R50, which looks completely usable. It's a crop sensor, as is the R10. But if you want to go to the more premium full frame sensor, then you're looking at the R8. Now, in terms of the lenses that you can use, you still can use the 100mm lens from Canon, but if you wanted to use their previous 60mm lens on a modern mirrorless camera, you do have to use an adapter. But all three companies have some really good options. As I said, with Canon, the R8 does look like a really good camera. Oh, but I should add, if you're going to get a 60mm lens on a full frame mirrorless Canon camera, it will go into APS-C mode or the crop mode, if you remember what I showed you earlier. But in dentistry, you do want something that's light. You don't really want a super heavy setup, and it's important to think about weight. Sometimes it's nice just to be able to photograph with one hand and have your other hand free to do other things like retracting or suctioning or using the 3-in-1. And this is where one of my friends had a really cool setup. He's got a Olympus OM5 Mark II, which is an older MFT micro four third sensor camera, and he's got it paired with a 60mm M Zico macro lens, which I've seen in person. I got him to bring it to a wedding that we attended recently, and we were playing around with it in a car park. I know it's quite sad what we do sometimes, but it looks really cool. It is really light, and he's got that paired with a twin flash. So if that's something that you're interested in, like a really light setup, then definitely check that out. But what would be my recommendation for somebody who's looking to buy in 2025? Having done quite a bit of research and having an interest in photography, I would say to look at the Sony A7C II. So it's part of their A7 lineup. The C stands for the compact cameras that they have, so it will help with the weight of it. And the A7C II is one of their latest compact cameras, and it basically performs similar to the A7 IV, which is what I have, and it's a great camera, so it still packs a very good punch. So it's a fantastic camera, and you compare that with the Sony 90mm lens, because I think that although I would really love to have the 100mm new macro lens, I think it's a bit of an overkill for your everyday dentist that may not necessarily use it for photography. And as I said, it's more expensive. But if you're into photography, then you'll know which lens that you'll go for. You could then pair this with a Godox ring flash or twin flash. And the good thing about Godox is they do have specific Sony flashes that can pair with them and supposedly give better outcomes. But I think one of the best setups for dental photography, if you're somebody who's looking for, the very best, and you're somebody who's going to present their cases on the big stage, on a poster maybe, or on presentation, or even have your photos printed in a book, then I would say to have a look at the A7CR. So again, it's the A7 lineup, it's the compact camera, but it's the R line. So it's got that amazing 61 megapixel sensor, which is just incredible. It's a really, really good camera. It's essentially the compact version of the Sony A7 IV. For those of you that know about the A7 IV camera, you know that it's just awesome. And then of course you compare that with the new Sony 100mm f2.8 G Master lens. As you know, G Master lenses are just, they are their top tier type of lenses. I've got one and yeah, highly recommend them. And that would be an elite setup. So I appreciate that these setups will be more expensive, but I'm just trying to think of the bigger picture and thinking about how you can use these cameras for other things. For example, I mentioned that you can go on holiday, or you might want to take family portraits, or whatever it may be. You might even want to create better content on your Instagram for your dentistry, for example. There are advanced video features on these cameras, for example, to be able to record in 10-bit log footage, or to truly record at a high FPS and then slow it down in post and create those more cinematic videos that you see on Instagram, maybe a bit too much, but nonetheless, you'll be able to create that yourself. Overall, you're going to really enjoy having a more professional type of camera, not only for dentistry, but just for everyday use as well. By the way, while doing the final preps of this video, I've seen on Wex Photography website that you can get a combination of some of the gear that I've mentioned all in one on their website. So that's definitely something to check out. However, I reckon you could probably source these things cheaper by looking at individual websites. So yeah, dental photography and dentistry. It's been a long video. I appreciate that. And I probably have gone on tangents more than I wanted, but it's something which I enjoy, and I hope it's, as always, beneficial to you guys. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'll try and get back to you. As always, I would appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, that's me done. Peace out.